All right, good evening. I'm so excited. This is the very first meeting of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Board. The first thing I want to do is thank everyone for coming out on a Monday evening. I know we're all like kind of done for the day, so I really, really appreciate that. I'm hoping Mr. Kelch is on his way. I did send him a message. But the first thing, I just want to kind of go around and do introductions. I think everyone has a copy of the agenda in front of them. I'll be taking some minutes, but one of the things we're going to be talking about later is sort of like who wants to do what role. But tonight I'll do the agenda, I'll do the minutes. So as way of introduction, my name is Susan Hoover. Everyone knows me here. This was creating this board was part of why I wanted to run for council. This is a real passion for me, wanting to make sure that all members of Norwood feel heard and included, and I think that we are making some amazing strides, but I think we still have quite a ways to go, and I love this collection of people that we have together, so I'm just super excited, and that's who I am and why I'm here.
Keith Hamrick, I'm the HR director for the city. I guess my main focus will try to expand diversity and inclusion within employment within the city. Was my stipulation, was to only do employment. I wear a lot of hats in the city, so I probably won't work too much with like the community outreach stuff, which I will help, but I primarily will focus on things that will help us attract a diverse workforce. Right now we don't have any females in our fire department. People of color population is very low in the city, so just things that I'm trying to work in. First we have to attract the people to take the tests and to be interested in the positions, and then they have to pass the test, and then they have to pass the interview. So there's a lot of hurdles that people have to jump over. But the first step is to find people that are interested to take the civil service tests, and that's where kind of my role in this board is, why at least I view it as.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Green. I'm the project director and accreditation coordinator for the Norwood City Health Department. I'm so happy to be here. Some of my projects with the health department include more VA involvement or better resources for disabled veterans. And that's it. I'm sorry, I'm not a good public speaker. I'm not really nervous.
No, that's fine. You're doing a good job.
But I'm so happy to be here. Anything I can do to help, or I'm happy to do.
Awesome. I'm going to skip over to Ashley. We'll come to you.
Okay. My name is Ashton Tucker. I am a newly appointed board member. I think my posting's 3 years. I currently serve as an assistant prosecutor for the city of Cincinnati. Went to law school at UC. I'm really excited to be here. We just we bought our house in October of 2021, and I have loved living here so far. No complaints. I would like to see more people of color, more people of diverse backgrounds in my neighborhood. Luckily for me, I live on a street, I live on Homer. My next door neighbors are also a lesbian couple, and my across the street neighbors are from the Dominican Republic, and that's great. And I wish we could have more of that, and I want their representation to be obvious. I want us to be obvious and clear that we are wanting, needing, hoping that people of color and people of diverse backgrounds would feel comfortable here, I guess, is what I'm saying. I'm happy to be here.
Good
Let's
answer.
just do the thing.
Yeah. Awesome. I am Stephanie Bacher. I am also newly appointed, of course, to the DEI Advisory Board. I sit on Norwood, City of Norwood. Today I work for the City of Norwood. Actually, starting on Monday, I will take a new position, so I will not be with City of Covington. City of Covington, I will take a new position with Great Parks in Hamilton County. as their sustainability coordinator starting on Monday. But I serve on DEI board for City of Covington and have passed some not passed, we don't really have to have stuff voted on, but we've brought to light some diversity and inclusion issues in the City of Covington as well, which I'm pretty proud of. It didn't actually take much arm twisting to get some things done, so I want to bring that experience here. And also, I love my neighborhood. I've been a Norwood resident for 15 years, but I want to see more people of color, more diversity in my neighborhood. We had like a neighborhood walk on Rhonda Avenue on Saturday, and I was like sort of making a joke about it. It's really not funny at all, but it's like we had a family of color move in, and I feel like they probably moved out because I was like, hey, hi, how are you? Welcome to the neighborhood, like every time I pass by them. So but I would love to see that as well, and learn about how the city works and what DEI looks like in the city. And if it's anything I can bring my work from Covington to, I'll be happy to do that. And yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Derek Robinson. I'm a speech therapist. I'm a new member of the advisory board. I do not have a lot of experience with DEI, to be honest, but I feel like my job as a therapist, communicating with people, particularly older people, qualifies me in some way. I'm looking forward to really learning kind of what this work looks like, and hopefully being a part of a team. So.
Thank you.
I'm Keith Moore. I'm the law director of Norwood. I am not a member of the DEI board, but I think it's great that it's something that Norwood, I have heard over my many years with the city that, it's just a constant complaint, Norwood. So to find a way, a concrete way to actually make some efforts to turn that around, or at least, to help in the perception, if not the reality, to hit both of those, I think is huge. I was invited to scare you all with the government and the sunshine rules and keep us all out of trouble.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do want to invite our primary speaker for this evening, who is Ivy Banks. Very excited. We've got the opportunity to meet, I forget, it's been a while, but she is with Xavier. She has more qualifications than I could even begin to name. But she is currently, she's the Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, and she's going to give sort of a primer for all of us so we can all kind of be on the same page, as well as I think this would be great for any folks watching at home to get a sense of what this looks like and what this means when we're talking about DEI work. So the stage is yours.
Good evening, hello, how are you?
Hello, hello.
And congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you to Councilwoman Hoover for the opportunity to meet with you. I'm actually going to pass out some handouts. And as I do that, I'll give you a quick background. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Vice President of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion at Xavier University. My family's first winter back here in Ohio, we moved from Phoenix, Arizona, so this is lovely and very, very warm here. So excited to be back here in Ohio where I grew up. Actually lived in Norwood when I was a student at Xavier University. I am a recovering attorney and have now found a home in D&I. So as we begin this work, I want to just thank you for, again, saying yes. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I think about those four as the foundation for us to create this fabric of belonging, right? If you can think back and think about the moment or an opportunity or a time when someone made you feel welcomed, when someone made you feel like you belong there, what did that feel like? What was that experience like?
Feels good.
It feels good. Why? What was it about that experience that made you feel good?
Well, it happens on Saturday after my example, my Rhonda Avenue neighbor walk, but my neighbor my other neighbor put it together because she felt welcomed in a different street, which did the same thing, and folks opened their homes, and there was some drinks involved, and that was always makes everybody feel like they want to make friends, so that helped. But it was just nice for the camaraderie and knowing your neighbors and the folks that you live around. So it just feels a little bit more like family.
Felt like family?
It's like
Is
connection.
that hello? Connection?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
me, it felt overwhelming and emotional because I just never had that support before, so it kind of like rushed me the first time that ever happened, and I'll never forget it, but felt good.
What did they do? What was their action? Did they say hello? Did
No,
they
they
smile?
just like actually were engaged when I was talking and kind of bounced the conversation back and forth with me, and they asked me questions and they cried with me, and it was just like, wow, that never happened before, so.
Perfect. Usually when we talk about this idea of belonging, it can seem foreign because you have these words, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. But I want you to boil it down to this. It's when you felt like you belonged. And there was something that someone did, whether it be when you're walking in and you have no idea where you're going, and someone says hello to you on the elevator like you did when I was coming upstairs and said, do you know where you're going? Come with me. We will just find out together. It's in those moments, right? Now, I want you to also think about a time when you didn't feel like you belonged, when someone didn't make you feel welcomed. And think through that experience. And as you begin this work, understand that this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and leading to this idea of belonging is we set the foundation for letting someone know that we've thought about them before they arrived. So one of the things I heard you mention actually when I was with Councilwoman Hoover and we met, and then I heard here mentioned a couple of times, is that I want others to know that they're welcomed here in the city of Norwood. That means you have to think about me before I get to the city of Norwood. That means that you've thought about accessibility. You thought about whether I can access the materials online and I can find my place here even when I'm searching the website and find those Ohio Sunshine Laws. You're actually thinking about it in the neighborhood and thinking about, let's think about the signage. Let's think about the language that we're using on our website. Let's think about those things that make someone feel like they belong even before they arrived. Because what that makes me see is that you thought about me before me having to say something to you. You thought about that experience. And I always think about Shirley Chisholm. She is one of my sheroes. She was an African-American woman. She ran for president, but actually ended up in Washington, D.C., serving us in the House of Representatives. At that time, she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And as you begin this work, realize that you're going to be the folding chair for everyone in the city of Norwood that doesn't have a seat at this very powerful, privileged table. That you have to think about, what does this mean for our LGBTQ plus community? What does this mean for our communities of color? What does this mean for people with disabilities? What does this mean? And challenge each other to say, how am I going to be that voice at the table for diverse communities? How are we going to have that conversation here before they arrive so that they can know this is a place of welcome and a place where they can find belonging? One of the things I included for this packet is I always go back and look at places that do this work really well. And I shared with Councilwoman Hoover that the city of Edmonton, and I know I'm picking up from our neighbors all the way up north, and some of the work that they do. I use this foundation of the slides that you see here, but they use it for their training. I wanted you to be able to see it from the aspect of how do we actually take this work and apply it to what you're going to be doing for the city. And this framework that they've established, we use it in higher education, we use it in different settings, and you'll see here that in supporting inclusive communities, this is a way to think about equity, equality, and justice in a way that allows you to say, why? I'm going to tell you why it's important to ask that question, why. We think about diversity, that's the rich experiences of what we bring to the table. So when you look across from the person that's sitting across from you, or you look at this fabulous person that's standing in front of you, you're welcome. When you think about diversity, it's the rich experiences that we bring. It's our background, all of those things that make you unique. When you look at the person that's sitting across from you, and you just get to look at me because there's no one across from you. When you look at the person that's across from you, can you tell where they came from? Can you tell their story? Can you tell about their invisible disabilities? Can you tell about their geographic diversity? All of those things, you have to be able to have a dialogue and you have to have a conversation. But that's the part of diversity, right? Diversity is all of the things that make us who we are. We talk about equality. That's the idea that we started, and we said, how do we ensure that everyone has equal access? And when we began this work, you'll see that most of our offices were the Office of Diversity. We transitioned to this idea of Office of Equality. And we pushed ourselves beyond that because we realized that not everyone is starting from the same place. So even if we say we want to reach equality, it requires us to think about equity. It requires us to think about how do we ensure that no matter what your starting place, that we've thought about that before you arrived. And that's something that we're going to talk about that today. And inclusion is what are the action items that we are going to take, those that are sitting around the table, to ensure that our environment is one of belonging. Now let's look and see how that applies. If you look at the slides that are the handouts that I gave you, and for those of you that are with us online, the first one says inequality, unequal access to opportunities. What do you see in that picture? It's the tree, green tree with apples on the tree. What do you see in that picture?
One of our characters is having an apple being dropped to him. The other one is not.
Yes.
There's only two apples even as an option, where the other side has multiple options, and some are even being given to this little guy.
One has lots of apples that are just kind of falling down from the tree. The other little guy is going, where's my apple? There's nothing falling down. Why do you see that there might be some of the apples falling down pretty quickly and easily for the one character that's on the one side of the tree?
The tree's leaning.
The tree's leaning a little bit. Okay, so we see that there's this idea of inequality. And then we pushed ourselves again to say, well, how do we get from this idea of inequality to talk about equality? This is how we evenly distribute tools and assistance. And when we looked at this or thought about this idea of equality, we thought about this idea of equality. What do you see on that picture?
They got the same tools, but they can't reach the same spot.
They have the same tools, so they provided a ladder to be able to climb up and to access the tree, but they still can't quite have the same outcome. Why?
They didn't take the differences into account when they provided the tools.
They didn't take the differences into account. So they didn't think about, wait a minute, I'm approaching this a little bit differently than someone else. So even though we provided a resource, and I'll give you an example of what that looks like. So even though we created a website, we didn't think about the color choices that we use. So all of the information is there, but someone that is colorblind can't access the information in the same way. We created the website, but we didn't think about how we organize the information, so someone that uses a screen reader can't access the information in the same way. So we certainly provided you the tools. Everyone can get online and everyone can have access to our website. However, because we didn't think through how you access or need to access the materials, there's still some inequality. What about equity? What happened with equity? What was the shift there? In equity, it says here on our slides, it is custom tools that identify and address inequality.
So the ladder on the right is taller to accommodate for the tree leaning in the other direction.
The ladder on the other side is taller. So now we both can access the tree in the same way. And even though my ladder is a little bit taller, it's because that's what I needed in order to be able to access those resources in the same way. So let's use that same example when we're talking about an online environment. So if I created an accessibility checker on my website, it allows me to ensure that I'm hearing and I'm listening for how someone with a screen reader may be accessing my materials. It might be providing the information for me to say, if I use this accessibility checker, it allows me to put the information in the correct order so that someone that has a disability can access the information in the same exact way as someone without. It also provides me with an opportunity to think about someone that is colorblind, because now I have access and provided the same access. Even though I'm shifting what I am doing, I'm shifting a little bit with respect to the resource. Again, I'm thinking through how you might access the material. Now, what about justice? What does that look like that's a little bit different on that picture?
The tree has been pulled straight or pushed straight, and there are more apples on, or I assume there are apples on the other
They're all afforded the same
side.
opportunities.
Everyone has the same opportunities. So that's the work that you do. That's the work that's hard. That's the work when I said, what is it about that experience when you felt welcome, valued, and respected, where you felt like you belonged? What was it about that experience? And I said there was something that happened there. Someone was doing something. Someone said hello. Someone smiled. Someone thought about you before you arrived. Now, when we think about this in this way, it requires us to put some 2x4s. It requires us to do some work. Now, the thing is, I'm not going to carry the 2x4s by myself, and I hope you won't try to carry it by yourself as well. But that requires us to start to do the work a little bit differently, because we are changing and shifting the system of inequalities to ensure everyone has access to the same materials, the same resources, and the same supports. Now, that's the work that as you begin to really think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and really accessibility to create an environment of belonging, that's that hard work. It's getting out the 2x4s, understanding what are the policies, what are the ways that we can think about the work that we do here for the city, in the city of Norwood, to ensure that every one of our citizens or everyone that is involved here feels that there's a sense of belonging. And when you think about this, and I'm going to the next page to really talk through each of these little cartoons a little bit differently, as it'll explain a little bit more about equality, equity, and justice. And what we're going to see is how do we apply this when we're doing this work specifically. Again, as you addressed or as you talked about, equality is when we address inequality by ensuring that everyone has the same tools and resources to succeed. However, we want to avoid a one-size-fits-all approach. We have to think about the unique needs of every single person in our community, and that's where the hard work comes in. And that's tough, because it requires us to think about it in that same light that I gave with Shirley Chisholm to say, how am I being a folding chair? How am I thinking about someone that's different or differently situated than I am to ensure that their voice is represented here at this table and in the work that you will do? We thought about equity. Again, we talked about equity and looked at it. We adjusted the ladder so everyone can ensure that they have access to the apples. It requires us to acknowledge based on the variety of lived experiences, our intersectionality, and all of those things about who we are, that we may face something differently. And how do we ensure that we provide the resources and support to ensure that we all can access the materials in the same way. Going on to the next page, and I'm on page Module 4 activity, when we talk about to further illustrate. Here's an example, and I'll read the example because I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about it. It says your league is hosting its meeting, and it's in person in a hall. This is a special meeting because league members will finally get to vote on a new name for a renovated ice rink in the area, so your board is hoping for a good turnout. Let's pretend that your hall has only one entrance with no automatic door and two concrete stairs that users must climb or descend to get in and out of the building. Some residents have started to voice concerns because they feel that the current hall entrance makes it hard for them to get inside the space to attend meetings. As a result, they feel as though their voices are not represented in league decisions and they miss out on seeing their neighbors. So this is a step-by-step question guide that you'll go through and you start to think about. Who's impacted by this? If this is our only access, who is impacted by this specific meeting in this specific space?
Handicap.
Yep.
Handicap.
Handicap, right? What else, or who else? What do you think, what else would be impacted by the decision to host a meeting in that space?
Potentially the elderly.
Absolutely, the elderly in the community.
Anyone
Looking-
who's pushing a stroller or has any vehicle with wheels?
Absolutely, mothers that are coming in with strollers. We're also thinking about people with disabilities, elderly, so it's a pretty sizable group if we think about all of the members in the city of Norwood, right? And so we start to think about that. The next thing that we want to do, and I'm not going to go into depth to this, but I'm going to challenge you to start to think about this, is to figure out on step 2 is how or what is the root cause of this? And part of that is to continue to ask yourself the question of, but why? But why? Not everyone can attend the meeting, but why? And what is the cause of this? And keep asking yourself, but why, but why, but why, until you get the cause, the root cause. And why is it important for us to get to the root cause? Because we have to understand whether we are addressing an equity issue, if we are addressing an inclusion issue, whether we're addressing a diversity issue, because all of them will have a different approach to how you will address the issue. And this step-by-step guide will talk about, when we think about this, right? How do we figure out, and once we figure out again, but why, and we figure out the root cause, our next challenge is to say, how do we overcome this? What tools can we put in place in order to ensure that we've thought about all of those citizens and the opportunity for them to get involved with us before we even open up the doors for the meeting? So before we send out the invitation, and we have many members who are mothers, who are disabled, or people with disabilities, or who are elderly, reach out to you, you want to think about that in advance. So when your invitation goes out, it says, we are having and hosting a meeting here. However, we want your voice to be included. So here's what we've thought about. And what are the things that we can think about? And if you go to that next page, and I know I'm going through this very quickly, short time period. We want to figure out what solution is needed, whether it's in equality, equity, or justice. And part of this, again, is we have to understand what the root cause is, because that will help us to have a solution-oriented approach. It will prevent us from just throwing things up against the wall, but we've really thought about what our citizens, what your citizens need, and how you can be most effective in addressing those. And part of this is ensuring that if we go through and it's an equality issue and we approach it from justice, then we may cause more impact or more harm as opposed to more good. And let's talk about why that is. And I'm going to go through this step 3, if you're following along with me, step 3, to figure out what type of solution is needed a little bit more in depth. When we look at each of the solution types, and we talked about equality, equity, and justice, there's different times when you will use each one. And again, we said we want to make sure that we are addressing that specific solution type so that we don't create more challenges. And you're going, wow, this is a lot. I promise you this framework will help get through this approach and get through this process. So we'll talk about when to use. So after you brainstorm and say, here are the issues, here are some things that we want to think through, let's talk about when we use this. So when we look at equality, when the cause of inequality is linked to something in our operations that can be changed, this is something that we're talking about in the realm of equality. What are some of the questions or an example of that? For example, when we talk about the fact that we want to send out mail-in ballots because we want to make sure that if there is a mother that is on bed rest and can't access the meeting, that we want to ensure that their voice is here and that we've thought about that, right? If we think about the elderly who may not be able to have access, or even those that have disabilities that may not be able to drive when it gets darker outside, that we want to think about that and ensure that their voice is there. So we use things like a mail-out ballot, and those are examples of an equality-oriented solution, because everyone who wants to come to the meeting or be involved in that space will be able to send in their voice or send in their information. Another way that I use that is a link on the website, or when I send out the invitations, I'll send out a link so that you'll be able to incorporate your voices in that link on a survey. When we talk about equity, if we're thinking about it through the lens of equity, this is when each underrepresented group is experiencing a different root cause for inequality. When the cause of inequality is linked to an element of the operations, again, that can be changed in most of these situations. And when creating a custom set of tools for the community would be feasible. And one example that they give to this is streaming online to residents and ensuring that residents have access to that online. This is a way to ensure, again, that all folks can be able to attend a meeting, and we've thought about that positionality, again, before people, before that invitation goes out. The next one it talks about is justice. And when the root cause of inequality is tied to issues, right, between individual groups or environments or institutions, and this is when we're looking to change our system, and this is when we bring out our 2x4s and we bring out the string and we're saying, how do we adjust the tree? One of the ways that they give you an example of that is, how do we talk about, from the DEI committee, applying for a grant and building a ramp outside of that building or outside of that space to ensure that if members want to be there in person, that we are addressing that we are thinking about the systemic piece, the 2x4 that we're putting on the tree. So this gives you a framework to think about through each step. How do I think about diversity, equality, equity, and justice in a way that gets us from just a discussion to a solutions-oriented decision-making process? How do we think about this in a way that allows us to think about the solution and ensure that the work that you're doing here, again, which is very, very important work, drives us to the solution of making the change? And what you'll see finally, once we get to the last part of this, it'll give you some thoughts to think about as you're moving forward. I provided the Art of Inclusion, our diversity and inclusion framework from the City of Edmonton, but it also provides you with some resources and reflection questions to think through of, how do you think through this work from a problem-solving space? How do you think through this work from the space of saying that it's not, we don't want to just identify a problem, we want to identify a solution in order to move us forward. I'll pause there and see, what questions do you have?
The accessibility piece of this, is it simply accessing the building? Is it simply, I mean, is it really just access to things? It can, like, kind of elaborate on a little bit, because these committees like get stuck on the DEI part, and we have enough trouble, kind of, I do, understanding what those words even mean, and then the accessibility piece as well, if you can
I think
give a
my
little
question
bit.
kind of piggybacks on that is, how do you sort of select, or how do you find out which one to target? Because it's kind of a piggyback on that question.
Good questions. A couple things. I'll go here. With the accessibility piece, it's about access, yes, to ensuring that everyone can access either the materials or the physical space in a way that allows me to be able to engage with it in the same way as an able-bodied person would be able to. And so when we think about that, and from that lens, one of the spaces that we see the most opportunities for that is not just the physical space, but in the online environment as well. And there's different checkers that you can do that are free to download to be able to get that information. But yes, it is, that's where we focus on with respect to accessibility. The question was, how do we know? I would say, look at your data to be able to understand who your community is. And I think that's part of the first thing that you're going to be able to find out with the survey. It's going to be very important that you really think through those questions so that you can come back, and when you go through really the strategic problem-solving oriented approach, that you're thinking about who is in our community. So we're thinking about it from the lens of accessibility. We just identified very quickly without doing much of a deep dive. And I think once you go into a deep dive, you'll find even more, especially as it relates to invisible disabilities. But as you think about this work, you want to make sure that your questions are targeted so that you can address which populations need the most support and prioritize that as you begin this work. One of the things that happens often is that you find the committees that start this work get overwhelmed right away because they start with a huge volume of the things that need to be done. Take a step back, right? Look at the data that you have in front of you and say, let's prioritize. One of the things that the City of Edmonton does, and a couple others, but I provide it here, is that they did a priority list over the next 10 years. And so they said, here's what we'll be able to do in year 1 and year 2. Based upon the data, we realized that this community needs the most support. And they went through that because why? This is actually the framework that they use. Here's why. We realized that this community has been underserved in the city for 20 years or 50 years. And we realized that this is the community voice that has been the most vocal on social media, has been the most vocal in other spaces. So we want to focus on that community as our priority, but we'll continue to work on the other communities and populations. So I would say look at the work, look at the data to be able to support that. With the realm of accessibility, you'll find that it in most spaces, that's one of the voices that has the highest need, but has been the most invisible when we talk about diversity work. I'll go here.
So tell me if I'm absolutely off base, but I am looking at the solution type, equality, equity, justice, and I'm looking at all three examples, and what it would seem to me is that based off of the scenario that was provided, all three of those scenarios are things that seem to be absolutely something that's necessary. Is this more of a prioritizing of each one of these things, or is it ever feasible to be doing all three at once?
Absolutely. Here's where the priorities come in. It's about timing, and then also making sure that number one, that it's about timing, it's about accountability, and it's also about what you'll be able to do until you get to that point. So once you identify that there is a need, as you looked at all three of those, they were able to do something immediately, which is have the information online, to be able to do the online survey so that you can submit your feedback in advance or submit it simultaneously with the meeting. But at the same time, they were working on the grant. And usually that process will take 18 to 24 months minimum before you're able to see that those funds start to come in. And then it's usually a timeline before you can spend those funds, right? So you'll have about 18 to 24 months until those funds come in, and then you'll start to see those come in over the course of 3, maybe 5 years. So that's just giving you a total of 7 years, and all of your commitments, I think, are 3, right? So it's like we start that work, right? So you start that work, but at the same time, you're looking at how we can do this 2x4s, how we can push the tree and upside and push the tree and get that tree straight, or be able to do those things that are the measures that are the 2x4s, and then continue the continuity of this work. What I talked about with accountability is also transparency. One of the things that is really important, especially as you begin this work, is developing a rapport and a trust with the city residents. So holding yourself accountable, saying what you're going to do in that first year, and holding yourself accountable to that. If in your first year, it is feasible to do a survey and to provide an update to the community about the survey, while at the same time that you're searching for grants, those are 3 really big things, and that's a great work, because we don't change the world in 1 year or in 1 day. So make sure that you're pacing yourself with that, but hold yourself accountable to the city of Norwood and to the residents. Put that information online as much as you can to say, here's where we are, and then also show your progress. The best cities that have done this, they show their progress. We plan to apply for the grant within 6 months. We are applying for the grant. We have applied for the grant. And I know it seems like, well, wait a minute, we're giving a lot of information, is that micromanaging? But this is showing your citizenship that you really are here, you're doing this work, and even though it doesn't seem like there's much progress, there's a lot of things that are happening in the interim. And even having the information that here's why we are hosting the information online, here's why we are doing this, and including that and being as transparent as possible really goes back to that accountability, and it will develop that rapport and that trust with the community so that they can come to you and let you know where your priorities lie.
I just wanted to ask about resistance, because, as much as I think all of us here are like on board with this, you expect there to be some people who are resistant, maybe due to fears about missing out or whatever. But I don't have a lot of experience with this, so I don't know if I'm building it up in my mind, and maybe you haven't had to confront that in any, but.
Sure, in 15 years, I have no resistance ever felt with any of the D&I work that absolutely, absolutely. The reasons why I say accountability and through transparency is to be able to talk through what you are doing, Because sometimes when we use diversity, equity, inclusion, just like when I came here, it's like, I don't know which word to use. They're all three separate things. So is equity and justice, right? This is not something that we talk about regularly. It's not something, conversations that we have. So one of the things that I do often is dispelling the myths about what we do, right? This is dispelling the myths about, we are looking to ensure that every single one of us unpacks our bias. I have been doing this work for almost 20 years, I won't tell you, I'm still 21. I've been doing this work for almost 20 years, and I still have biases. My unconscious biases impact me every single day. However, I have to be able to think through, how do I unpackage that and realize what is it that I'm bringing to the table? So absolutely face resistance. One of those, again, is accountability. The other one is transparency. The other one is thinking about the dialogues that you can have. Perhaps one of your opportunities for this group in that first year is we're going to have 5 dialogues with the city of Norwood, and each of us take turns, 2 of us at a time, to talk about, this is what we do, and this is how we want to ensure that our city is open and everyone feels a sense of belonging here. One of the things that I started with is I didn't start this conversation with diversity, I didn't start it with equity, I didn't start it with inclusion. I said, tell me a time when you felt like you belonged, right? Every single one of us can think about a moment where that teacher, that person, that stranger in the elevator, until now we're friends now, right? Made me feel like I belonged because of a smile, because of a moment. And that's really what we talk about with this work. How do we find that sense of belonging for all of us? For some of us, it requires the avenue of diversity. Some of us, it requires us to think through equity. So having those dialogues with the community, being as transparent as possible, but no matter what, you still will face resistance. And one of the one of the things that I do in those moments is that I won't be able to change everyone's mind, but I'll be able to plant a seed, and they'll go back and think about it. And they may come back, and they may not. However, you planted that seed. You're going to do great work. Thank you again so much for what you're going to do. I'm looking forward to the amazing things that are going to happen in Norwood. You have you have a willing partner at Xavier University, so if there's ever anything that we can do to support you, please feel free to reach out.
You know we will. This is not the last we'll be seeing. So thank you, really, really appreciate it. And I'll reach out to you soon after I read over the Edmonton material. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good night.
All right, so that was the fun part. Sorry, Keith. Mr. Moore.
I'm not often accused of being too fun, so that's not an issue.
That can't be the first time you've ever
No,
heard this.
no.
Sorry, your turn.
I will say this, is that, in regards to pushback or disagreements, or, if this body wants to do a particular thing and people think that's not the right thing to do, I think from being on council, my experience has been that the first part of the process is hearing what they have to say and trying to understand, okay, what's the point you're making? Because quite honestly, they may be smarter than I am. And so, oh, you're right, I never thought about that. That may be an issue. The other side of it is that after you've done that, there's nothing wrong with saying, I hear what you're saying, and I disagree. And I'm the one that's on this, so this is what I'm going to move forward with. And that's about all you can do. Because otherwise, you will never, ever, if you just do whatever the last person, otherwise you're stuck with whatever the last person you talked to told you to do. So that's my 2 cents on that. I did want to say this is one of the pitfalls on any public body is the government and the sunshine law. A lot of it's kind of counterintuitive unless you come from the perspective, as she was saying, that when you talk about transparency and accountability, as a government body, you work for the public. And so they have the right to know what you're doing. They have the right to be a part of the conversations you have. There's 3 big parts of that, the 3 things that tend to trip people up. The one is meetings. The second is minutes of the meetings. And the third is records, is public records. So for the meetings, and I did a little, I got a paragraph here that Tim wrote, and you wrote it for the Arts Board, but I just changed the names. And then I did just a little outline of some of the key points. There's a lot of different issues. If anybody's got questions, let me know, or the Assistant Law Director, and we'll walk through them. The meetings, discussions, the way this body makes decisions has to be in public. There have to be public conversations. And so we have the agenda for this meeting went out because you have to have public notice at least 24 hours ahead of the meeting. The one exception to that is if you decide to we're going to meet every, first Monday of the month at 6:30, then that's all you have to post. And then you can, change whatever agenda. The council meetings, we walk into council and they're like, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda. If you don't have a regular meeting, like this is not a regular meeting, you can't change this agenda. These are the only things you can talk about at this meeting. And by a meeting, it's technically a prearranged discussion of the public business. The courts don't pay any attention to the prearranged part. So if 4 of you are in the same place and start talking about this committee, about the stuff that this committee's talking about, that's a violation. And so if you're going to have a subcommittee, we're going to appoint a committee on hiring. If you appoint 3 people to that, none of them can talk to each other about it outside or communicate with each other outside of this meeting. If you appoint 4 people, then 2 of them can sit down and talk through something before they come back to the thing. So if it's a majority of whatever the body is, you can't talk about stuff, you can't communicate about stuff. And that goes, you can have a meeting by email or text, and you can get in the Cincinnati City Council got in a lot of trouble over this. So you can send an email out, here's the thing, here's some background information. You cannot send out thing and say, here's some background information for the next meeting, let me know what you think. It's the let me know, it's the conversation that's a problem. When you do that, which is hard because in the rest of the world, it's like, oh, we got the meeting coming up, but here's my thoughts. Does anybody have any objections or anything to add? You cannot do that because we will end up in court because that's the way it goes and we'll lose. So I think those are kind of the big ones. Susan mentioned at the beginning of this, you also have to take minutes of the meetings. They don't have to be recorded, they don't have to be televised, but you have to have minutes so that somebody later on can, I couldn't make it to the meeting. How did they decide to do that? They have to be able to get the minutes and see, what was the conversation that led to that?
So
That's the one big one.
Those minutes have to be posted in an online or public place for?
They do not. They just have to be maintained somewhere. The clerk's office should maintain them. You can put them online, that's fine. Now, there's a number of exceptions. You can go into executive session and talk about things. I can't really picture anything that this body is going to have to worry about that. But if it comes up, ask us and we'll figure it out if it's something that can be done. There are some things like, we're in the middle of a lawsuit and we're going to talk to our attorneys, or we're negotiating with the unions. You're in a negotiating position, then you can you have those conversations behind closed doors, but there aren't many, and this body really doesn't do any of that stuff. So the meetings and the minutes, those are just, don't talk to each other outside of this, really. That's the big thing, outside of these meetings, don't,
A group of us.
figure it out, right? Don't 4 of you communicate, don't, find a way to figure out whatever the decision's going to be outside of these public meetings. The second thing is records. Any email or text or document, piece of paper you get about the DEI board is a public record, pretty much. Keep it. Do not get rid of it. The public has the right to get a copy of your public records. If you got a public records, the public can come and say, hey, I want to see minutes from that meeting. Oh, I want to see a copy of that contract the city did. Oh, I want to see the audit trail for the law department to see what kind of money they're spending. That's the public's right. We work for them. And so all of those records, keep them. Do not destroy them. Set up a separate folder. If you got private email accounts, set up a separate folder to put all that stuff in there, because if we get a request, we're going to come to you and say, hey, I need all of the emails you got about this employment initiative that you were working on. Don't destroy those. When your term ends, get them to the law department or the clerk of council's office, because somebody will come back later and ask for, I want to see copies of those records. That's really the thing. I would also just recommend, don't text each other, because finding those are hard. You know, they just get lost, and if you know each other already, you already have other texts, so you get a text about, somebody requests, I would like to see all of the communications about, whatever issue it is. And then, I text Susan all the time. I got to go through and find the ones that are about that particular thing and then capture them. And the texts are a giant pain. Avoid them just as.
But things,
It just
and
makes it
correct me if
easier.
I'm wrong, if I'm going to text Derek, hey, we moved the meeting to 6 o'clock, that's perfectly acceptable to text.
That's perfectly acceptable to text, but that's a public record.
Even that's still a public record?
That would still be a public record, yes.
Okay.
And for example, we had, this is one of the lawsuits we had. It was about a particular property and the different, any conversations council had and the zoning board had about this particular property. And, it's like a half a block from my house, and they're friends of, the people that own it are friends of members of council and people on the zoning board. So, I need every public record from the last 8 months about this particular address, was the public records request, which is pretty much a legitimate one when it was something being discussed in front of council. And so there were some council members that were like, oh my gosh, I got to go through, I got 800 texts back and forth between me and my buddy, and I got to find those. And so just avoid the text. It just makes things harder, so.
Okay.
One quick question.
Sure.
In a situation like that, say where the public requests your text messages, will they see only the DEI-related content or all the interaction between those individuals?
We produce what they requested, and so it's finding a way, and I'm not a tech expert, but some people I'm going to take a picture of those texts that are relevant and print those out. That's one way. It just makes it harder to collect them all.
So just don't do it.
Yeah, if any of you get a public records request, somebody says, I want to see a copy, I want to see copies of all this stuff, just let the law department know, contact us first, and we may be able to say, yeah, if they just want a copy of the minutes and you've got a copy of the minutes, hand them a copy of the minutes.
Does that not
There may
have to,
be-
those requests don't have to come to the law office to begin with?
No, they do not. It's,
So someone could say, like, to me personally on the street, I would like to submit an open records request. There's no, formality to it at all.
Because
there is none.
I think if we get a formal request, I think personally, I would like it to go through the formal channels of the city.
Yeah.
If they just say, hey, can I just see the minutes? That's not, that is technically a request, but
Yeah.
I guess, is that how you would do that? Because I guess if I get a
Yeah.
written request, like, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, like we would get from the lawyer or whoever, I always give those to you, and then you guys tell me what to do with it. And that's how I typically do it, because I want that to go through formal channels.
Yeah, I agree.
and that's what send it to us. It may be, for the most part, no, you don't request public records of the law department. Some lawyers do. Some people do, but generally, I want a copy of the tax budget, so that you go to the auditor's office. I want a copy of the orders, you go to the clerk's office, the clerk of council's office. I want all the memos that the mayor sent. You go to the mayor, you contact the mayor. That's generally, this is a smaller city than some, the city of Cincinnati, that's a big place. You just walk into the office you want. You know what I mean? And that's where you'd get most of the records. And generally, I don't anticipate a lot, but if you get one, just contact the law department, and we'll let you know what steps need to be taken.
'Cause I got one once that was way too broad.
Yes.
And the law department came back and said, we have to respond, so you have to refine this request a little bit, because they wanted all communications from these 5 people for these last 6 or 8 months. There's no way that we could.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. So what specifically, so that's why I let the law department kind of
Right,
help me out with that.
just from another city's perspective, on the Covington website, we have, and I will try not to do this Covington versus Norwood thing all the time, but that's the experience that I have. But there's a way for you to say, I want to create an open records request, and then there's a way to do that on the website. I
We don't
don't
have that
know
yet.
what that looks like,
We
but
just-
maybe we can
We
think about
just switched
that.
to a better website
Yes,
platform,
Yeah.
so they're still kind of building it out
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah, but maybe
There's a
that's
lot-
something we can look in our
Yeah,
term
and
that
that
we
could be
made.
something that for
Be able to-
accessibility.
Sure, yeah.
But they're still building
And-
out a lot of the sections, just because
Sure.
it wasn't this one-to-one transfer from our old system was crap.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
And Noah, Sharonville's got that, and so I'm expecting that.
And we
you
have
know, this-
Civic Plus that
yeah,
we can
it's like-
integrate into our,
And that would,
That would help
I'm
too.
expecting that to happen, but it doesn't have to be that way. They don't have to tell you they are, they don't have to give you a return address, they don't have to, you know, it can be totally in person, it's, you know, you can't demand a reason. You can say, well, you wouldn't, if it was you, I wouldn't, but I tend to say, what is it you're looking at? Because you're talking like 30,000 pages.
Right.
Is there something in particular you really want?
Right, right, right.
You know,
Okay.
So, because we got one, it's like all civil rights claims against the police department, and I'm like, we're in the middle of a lawsuit from the 80s in Kentucky, and there's got to be 30,000 pages of documents. Did you want those?
When can you bring a truck to pick them up?
They're like, oh, no, that's not what I meant at all. So,
Okay, thank you.
so just be, I mean, really the bottom line is be sensitive to conversations outside of this, whether email, text, or in person. And be sensitive, just remember, all of those documents are public. Everything you get is public. And don't, hang on to them. They may be requested. And those are really the big takeaways. Any other details? I got, if you want to check the pie chart, whatever, but.
A time frame, like after 7 years, we don't have to worry about it, some kind of standard.
That's why I say when you're done, it's better to turn it over to the clerk's office. And we've got a document retention policy, and it's each office is a little different.
A lot of it is like I deal with personnel records, and a lot of my stuff is like the life of the employee. So if they leave, I have no idea if they're still living or not. So I have to keep them for a long time until it's reasonably assumed that they're no longer with us. But then there's other documents that it's like I only have to keep for 7 or 10 years. So it really just depends on what documents they are. And then we probably won't deal with this too much, but I deal with a lot of personal information, social security numbers, relatives. A lot of that stuff can be redacted. So that's why, again, I give all my stuff to the law department. There was stuff that I missed. So Tim brought it back to me and said, hey, you forgot to redact this stuff. So that's another reason why I go everything through the law department before I expect them to kind of hand it out for me, just because I want them to review it, package it together, and then email it, or someone can pick it up. But
And Keith tends to be part of the really big requests.
yeah.
We get some that are much smaller. I just want to copy this, and those are the easy ones. Technically, before you can destroy the documents, it has to be, you say, okay, this meets our policy, it goes to the Records Committee, and the Records Committee then sends it to the State Historical Society to see if they want a copy of it before it gets destroyed. And if they say, yeah, we don't want it, then we can destroy it. But that's technically the process that you're required to follow, so.
The military was intense like that, and then the paperwork needed to be shredded, like the 4-way shred, and then had to be burned.
Oh, my
was
goodness.
So many steps to that
Well,
process.
you're making us feel so
We don't do that.
important. right
I
now. It's my little Yahoo email account. It's so fancy right now, and also I am scared. I was gonna,
Yeah, so if you're just,
No need to be scared,
I will
just,
never have a phone number.
I do, whenever I send an
So
email,
sorry.
I always think, someone else could be reading this.
I always, ever since the military, I assume somebody else is gonna see it or read it at some point, so.
oh, yeah.
So just be aware and don't say, hey, send emails out saying, hey, what do you guys think about this? It's that kind of thing that gets us in trouble, so. If anybody has questions, feel free to give me a call or Tim or.
So I had one last question, because I'm on some other boards too, I just want to make sure I'm doing all that correctly. When sending out agendas, if they have a set meeting every month or every week or whatever, those agendas can be adapted, but if you don't have a set schedule like that, you cannot adapt the agenda? Is that what you said?
If you have, if it's a set schedule, you don't actually have to send out the agendas, it's a good idea.
Okay.
I mean, to publicly post them. And there's like 4 or 5 places in the city where they physically post them, and then there's a sunshine list, people that have requested to be notified of various meetings, and so they get emailed the agenda. That has to go out 24 hours before. If it's a special, if it's a not regularly scheduled meeting, then you cannot change the agenda from what is in that 24-hour notice. But if it is a regularly scheduled meeting, then you can, yeah. So like council, if we have a special meeting, council cannot change the agenda. But if they have, the regular meetings, we change the agenda pretty much every meeting, council changes the agenda to add something that came in the last minute, so.
Okay, cool, okay, thanks.
Sound good? Not too horrified?
Probably
I-
talked too
So
long.
my question then would be like, what will be the structure of these meetings if we only have 1 hour to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community, if we cannot talk about it outside of here at all?
So we can talk about it outside of here, but we can have subcommittees. So let's
Okay.
say we'll have 4 people, that was one of the things that Keith was saying, you could have 4 people on the committee, and then 2 of those people could meet separately.
Or you don't have to set up a committee at all, and,
Or just- Keith
2
and I
people
could have
volunteer, we're
lunch.
gonna go
Like,
meet
we
with,
could get a
we're gonna go meet
coffee
with
and talk
Xavier.
about it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
As
if
long
it's
as we don't
less
have
than a
quorum,
majority.
basically. It's all-
of
we have
Okay.
a majority
then
here.
you're okay.
Just 2 people.
Oh, if it's a subcommittee.
It doesn't have to be, but like
Right,
2
if
people
it's-
can go out and go, I'm gonna sit down with Keith and we're gonna work out something, and then we'll bring it back
Okay.
to the larger group.
And then
That's
we
fine,
would
'cause
say,
it's 2 of 7.
And
this
then make it
agenda
public
item, we'd like
or-
to add, Keith and I had this discussion, we'd like to hash it out at this time. Okay, all right, cool, thank you.
And you can say, when we plan the meetings, Susan, put this on the, because I'll probably be the one creating the agendas, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Well, that's sort of down under next steps, but I'll probably be the one creating the agenda. So you can say, hey, I had this meeting, maybe you had a meeting with Ivy, and I got the information that we need. Put that on the agenda.
Okay.
So then Susan puts that on the agenda.
Got it.
So that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Anything else that Keith wants to scare us about? Awesome. All right.
Mission accomplished,
I'll
man.
stop.
You've done your job. Maybe we should have done it the other way around.
Yeah, right.
Ivy just made us all like warm and fuzzy and
Yeah,
yay,
totally.
and now it's like,
She's
oh
like, you
no.
can do it. It's like, but you gotta be careful.
You can do it, but maybe don't.
It's working though. It is.
I mean, it's absolutely important to know. I'm gonna flip items 4 and 5, if that's allowed. 19, yeah, okay.
They're on the list, it's cool.
So next steps, and this is something that we've all talked about when we were doing the interviews, and so the first big step we're gonna be doing is the culture audit of the city employees. And that's, so one of the things that Ms. Banks gave me was some more information. Keith and I have had some time and have created sort of some rough drafts of questionnaires, but what Ms. Banks has access to as part of the big institution is a way of us, for us to get that information, to start gathering it, the tool to do it. Because we didn't want to do like a Google Doc, we didn't, things like SurveyMonkey are pricey.
Like a data collection.
Right, like how are we gonna get the surveys out? So, that will be, the first next step will be for us to figure out what is the tool, and then we'll share all the questions that we have and make sure that everyone on the committee is like, oh, this feels redundant, or I don't like the way this is. So that's where we'll kind of roll up our sleeves and hash out that piece of it.
Now,
Go ahead.
before we move on, I was talking to a bunch of people at the health department, and they were talking about doing similar things. Are you guys doing any surveys or anything that would it be interested to the board? Like, are you asking those types of questions, or should
We
we
are,
work together on that? Since-
Yeah, that
so
would
we're
be
not doing so many
fantastic.
surveys to the same
Well, because
people?
this is something that's really important, like diversity, equity, inclusion, that's a huge thing for accreditation, and like how we can bring it into healthcare.
So the information that we're bringing in would probably be a benefit to you.
Absolutely.
Because we're looking for who is our community, you need to know who your community is. So that was just my thought of if we could partner with the health department,
That'd be
since they're
fantastic.
already needing to do this, they may
Right.
already have that kind of structure
Yeah.
put into place. I don't know what you,
Yeah, I already wrote down data collection tools for pre-surveys and surveys, and
okay. I mean, I just don't want to double up on work if two departments, or if
Absolutely.
another department's
no,
doing
I
it.
appreciate it.
Yeah, so then, and then we can help each other out, because then their data collection could help us too with our research and trying to figure out where do we put all of that.
Right.
So-
And so once we gather all that data, that's when we can start figuring out what are the priorities. So it'll be very data-driven.
Is that something that, are you looking for something more than just metrics on gender and things like that, that maybe you could pull from, like your your payroll folks?
It's a whole, it's a bunch of things. It's not just identifying information, but it's also what's your sense of belonging, if you will,
Okay,
to use
okay,
that.
okay.
As an employee, are you dealing with any discrimination or bias? Have you witnessed it?
Gotcha.
Do you feel like your manager
Susan.
supports you?
Our grant writer also, I just got her grant funded, so we are doing a similar survey. But this survey is for cancer, like cancer screening and everything, because we are bringing like mobile units here for the uninsured. Anybody can come and be screened for cancer and have options for follow-up care. But since the grant was funded, we are actually able to pay people to take the survey and participate. And so if they're interested in participating further, there's funds to do that as well. So that's come to the city of Norwood. And so maybe we can, add questions or just like kind of branch off that a little bit. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, because if we already have that structure of like, hey, we're going to invite a bunch of people to take this survey, and then if we can't pay them, maybe we attach some of our questions or our demographic data, or, I don't know how that looks like.
Well, 'cause it's
I don't
important.
want to make like a 100-question survey,
Well,
but.
they're getting paid, that's why we're
True.
for that fee.
Take as long as you want. But if you're asking the same question we are, why are we going to ask the same person answer the same question twice?
Right, because some people just don't show up, and that's what I want to know. I want to see the invisible fences, like what is preventing people from showing up, accessing care, or like, what are those things?
Yeah, so the first step is to do the city employees.
Yes.
And then the second phase would be to do all the residents. In some of our earliest conversations, we felt like that was a really good strategy to first kind of get our feet wet. And, city employees, that's a much smaller number than 18,000. And it shows that we're taking it this seriously, that we're starting here. We're starting at the internally, and then we'll be moving outward. So, phase one will be the city employees, and then phase two will be all residents. So one of the first things will be looking at the data collection tools, and I can share with you the questionnaires that I have kind of created. And so when we come back, we can hash out what you liked, what you didn't like, cross out, and, it'll be really interactive. So that's sort of what I envision our next meeting will be, sort of around. So that's the big overarching. In the meantime, there's lots of smaller projects. One of the very next one is the MLK Day of Service. So that I started last year. It was dark COVID. I think we had like 30 different volunteers at like 4 different locations, which I thought was pretty good for, COVID life. So we're going to be doing it again. We're hoping to make it bigger and better. We've been having conversations about also doing a blood drive, which I'm really excited about. And have you heard back from them
I
yet?
have contacted Hawksworth, and they are willing to help us and get started. The pre-survey for the luncheon, I think we kind of, through them and everybody, but maybe they'd be willing to take a quick email, make it a question in the email, would you attend? But I'm just worried that people won't come to Norwood on their day off, or
And so maybe we need to focus more on residents who are already here.
Yes, that would be a good goal.
Yeah. So they're able to come?
And
And
they
will
said
do
they'll
the-
come no matter what, but it depends on how many people are going to show up.
Okay.
As to whether they do the mobile unit or, we do it at the high school or location
Okay.
like that.
Okay. So that will be the first kind of exciting thing is to start working on the blood drive.
Yes, ma'am.
And then also the day of service. The day of service is I reached out to a bunch of different organizations, and I think we still need to find out, I'm sure that there are more, but places that are willing to host volunteers for the day. So last year, it was at Baby Bear, New Vision, it's like 4 different places. Baby Bear, the church Zion by
By the
Indian
Mound?
Mound Cafe.
Yeah.
Zion, right?
Zion.
Yeah. They hosted, Norwood Together hosted, and maybe one other. Anyway, so we had a couple different locations. So I've already gotten commitment from Zion and Baby Bear. We're gonna reach out to Salvation Army and,
Kroger.
no, for volunteer locations.
Oh,
Where people can volunteer. I'm also thinking about the clothing place. Oh, what am I talking about? You know what I'm. Dress for Success. Dress for Success,
Okay, I
thank
couldn't
you.
think of the name.
Last year, they didn't have anyone who could be there on that Monday because it's a day off, so.
Sure.
So if you guys know of places, I would love for you to let me know, and let's try to see if we, and that's, if they would be a host site. And then the next step is to reach out to people to fill those volunteer spots.
Is there any particular duty that needs to be executed on the day of service? Like, what would Zion Church want volunteers to do?
Zion, they're having people work in their food pantry.
Okay.
Baby Bear, it was sorting clothes.
So just whatever it takes to run the organization, basically?
Right.
Okay, cool.
Norwood Together was stuffing welcome bags. So I'll have a big sign-up genius where the organizations will be listed, so the community can go on and be like, oh, that looks fun to me, I'll go do that.
Okay.
And so then they would sign up through that
Do
that
you
process.
want them to be Norwood-centric?
Yes.
Okay. We have Dress for Success in Norwood?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they moved like 2 years ago.
Really? Nice. Very good, very good.
I know. So that's something that I'm looking for support on. The other piece, and this is a little, this is a longer, this is Marsh Park. And I don't know if people here know about the history of Marsh Park. It's a neighborhood park, sort in the, is it Ward, it's Ward 3. And it was created in 1923, essentially as a way to keep blacks out of Norwood. There were there was an apartment, a home, and families were living there, some black families were living there, and they had purchased a plot of land and were going to be building, and had gotten a developer to build a home for them. And neighbors were concerned and went to city council and said, we don't want and I'm quoting from the newspaper, we don't want a Negro settlement. And the city solicitor said, well, you can't just kick people out for being black. And they found a way to appropriate the land and demolish the homes and made it a park. And that happened in 1923, so it's been 100 years. And I would really like to do some recognition around that particularly dark part of Norwood's history. Of course, this happened everywhere, all around the country. Interestingly, if you are familiar with Cincinnati history, John P. Parker, who's the big slave abolitionist, he worked the Underground Railroad, he freed himself from slavery and would nightly ferry people across from the Ohio River. And he, huge hero in that work. He died in 1900, but his widow moved to Norwood, his Miranda Parker and her 2 daughters, and they lived actually on Marsh Avenue. And in 1914, were pushed out. Essentially, the health department was weaponized against them. Windows were broken. I think it was 63 windows were broken, which then made the health department declare the home uninhabitable, and so they were pushed out. So that happened, that happened in 1914, 1915. So that was a good almost decade before the big thing that happened on Marsh Avenue when they just took the land. So when I think about reclamation of the park, a couple things. One is I would love to have a historical marker where we just sort of acknowledge that that was part of our history. Not that we're staying in our history, but that we're aware of our history and that this is now where we're moving towards. So that sort of transcendence experience. And I would love to have, I'd love to work with the art board and with the school and do something that brings light and love and art into that space. It still should be a park in my estimation. It still should be a place where kids run and play. But I'd love to have something interactive that also acknowledges that transformative experience of moving from that really dark time into sort of the Norwood of today and for the future. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm working with the Historical Society on getting a historical marker, which is not fun. I have all the historical documents. I'm happy to share those with you. There are newspaper articles and ordinances and lots of boring lawyer stuff. If you can translate, that would be awesome.
Yeah, seriously.
So that's another thing that I'm working on, and I'd love for this committee this board to help with.
Yeah.
Provide some brain thoughts on it.
What's tough about working with the Historical Society?
No, it's not tough working with the Historical Society, my apologies. It's tough getting a historical marker.
Oh, gotcha.
You have to have lots of data. You have to be very precise in your language.
Understood.
It also, there's a big application you have to apply.
Sure.
Or complete. You also have to have $3,400 on hand for if you get the marker, because they have one foundry that does these, and that's how much it costs.
Okay.
Only 26 markers are approved every year for the state, so it has to, hit that criteria. The Historical Society applied for one for the Norwood Mound, and they didn't make it. They didn't have enough historical data. So it's a rigorous process.
Okay.
So
that's good, right? Not willy-nilly.
yeah, they're not just slapping up.
Historical markers. Yeah.
Right.
Can't just make it up. Okay.
So that application was going to be due in, I keep saying March in my head. I believe it's the first day of April.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of support do you need from us?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're going to need, I want to connect with the residents around the park. I want them to be part of the conversation. Because it is a neighborhood park, we don't want to make it a destination park. They don't have the capacity. Like, we don't want to make it the Thousand Hands Park like in Pleasant Ridge, where people are driving there to go to that.
Yeah.
Because there's no
bathrooms, no parking, no.
Yeah, they don't want that. They don't want that.
Okay.
It's a place to be remembered, and,
Yeah.
it's important what happened.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be like a dark, so part of it is sort of helping me create a vision, and I think we need to get lots of voices in on that. And that's one of the other reasons I want to connect with the school and the art board.
Okay.
So I don't know if that answered your question, though.
I see the vision.
Oh, good.
Do you want to knock on doors? Do you want to put stuff in mailboxes? What legally can we do to?
Well, I know you can't
Probably
don't put anything in
mailboxes.
mailbox.
Yes, no, I know that.
Don't put
I know
anything in
that
mailbox.
rule. Yeah, Don't touch your mailbox.
So, yeah, I think that we should have a very concrete meeting, like, okay, what's the plan for Marsh Park? What are we doing?
Okay.
Where are we at? And so maybe we can divvy up some time for that at
Okay.
the next meeting as well.
Okay, cool.
And I can share the information that I have.
Sure.
That you guys can familiarize with yourself with that.
Do you have any idea where $3,400 is gonna come from yet? Just checking.
Sure. I have a couple thoughts. One is the Historical Society might be able to give us some money.
Okay,
I can see if the city would be willing to give us some money.
okay.
Yeah, we'll talk to Eric, I think. That seems like a win-win.
That feels like a supportive.
$3,400 seems like.
Which Eric?
The chairman of the finance committee?
Okay.
No, I don't think that, that's something that's worth putting some money into. I don't think there's any question about that.
Okay.
Okay, and
When I
my,
was on finance, I would have voted for it. So
Oh,
I
okay.
should tell you something.
I,
Yes, on everything.
yeah, and I was just asking if whatever support you might need there to get
Okay.
funding, so.
The
if
other
there's-
thing is, I met with Colleen Reynolds, who, she's this really neat woman. She was actually running for state rep, and then when they moved all the maps, she's like, oh, I'm not running, because now I'm running against someone who I'm going to vote for, so.
Right,
But when I was talking to her about this, it was over a year ago, her eyes lit up, and she's like, we can get money for this.
okay, cool.
And so maybe that's not for the signage, maybe that's for new playground equipment or like a music, they have those interactive music things in playgrounds for kids,
Yeah, like at
something.
Smale, yeah, like the.
Yeah,
okay.
so I think that there's some things that we can do that, that can be interactive and thoughtful. So other things would be looking at other places that have done things like this. What I've seen are mostly like murals. A mural would not work in an actual mural one, because there's not a wall there, but we might be able to do like a mosaic walkway, or, I think there are things that we could do.
Or artwork that you can climb on if you're a kid.
Right, exactly. And we do have some really amazing artists in Norwood, and maybe we could, tap on them and see what thoughts that they would have. So,
I don't know much about artworks, but is that something that maybe we could touch base with them, or?
yeah, absolutely.
It
Artworks.
sounds like there's some sort of organization like that here in
Well,
Norwood,
so
but-
we have our art board, and
Okay.
Carrie Maris is the president of the art board. Is it called president? Head of the art board? Chair of the art board? Queen of the art board.
Sure, that sounds great.
Queen.
That sounds really good, actually.
She actually gave me the name of someone who helped found Artworks, who lives in Norwood. And so that's someone who's on my list too.
Perfect.
Because one of the things that's so great about Artworks is they already have the system. So let's say we're going to do a ground mural. I'm just pulling that out. Say we're going to do a ground mural. I've never done a ground mural before. It would be awesome to have the kids involved in it, right?
Yeah.
So Artworks, that's what they do, is they train kids how to do that kind of project.
Oh, okay.
So we don't need to recreate the wheel. We can go to experts and say, okay, tell us how to do it, and they can. So that's my hope,
That
is
sounds
that we can
awesome.
do that.
Very good.
But yeah, if you want to spend some time Googling and get some ideas, and I think that would be fantastic to bring.
Cool. And to bring with
table.
us to the next meeting, but not via text or email.
Correct. Well, you could send it to me, but I can't then I can't email back to you.
Okay.
It would
Not
just-
even say received, nothing
You
like
can
that?
say receipt, but it's like, you don't want to talk about it.
No conversation, that's right, that's right. Okay.
I would say return back, no comment.
Redacted.
Redacted.
Just send read
We're going to
receipt.
be so compliant.
It's gonna be annoying.
Good.
We're,
That's
we're,
outstanding.
yes.
We're gonna send secret records requests just to test each other.
Yes, yes. Oh, my goodness.
Just kidding, I will not do that.
Okay. So that's sort of my brain dump.
Cool. That sounds great.
Any other questions just about what we talked about? Any other action steps between now and our next meeting, which we want to figure out when we do that next?
Yeah,
For
let's,
next meeting? Is that what you said? But
Well, no, before, is there
Oh,
anything
okay.
we want to, like, make sure that is on the agenda for next time?
When is our next meeting? Is that, do we have?
I don't know.
Are we doing one that's like every second
or every week?
Monday of every, whatever it is?
Well, if folks want to help with the MLK Day of Service, we would need to meet before then,
Like soon, maybe next week.
soonish. Yeah. That being said, I'm out of town next week. Awesome.
Help in what way? Like, what do you mean?
Finding locations to host, spreading the word, marketing. I have, oh yeah, so here's a list of places to contact to support. Fifth Third Bank, Shepherd Chemical, US Bank, Cappies, UDF, Kroger, Whole Foods, Porta Potty, that was from you. That was your idea. Xavier University, Iron Sharpens Iron, Boomtown Fitness. Those were just some basic businesses that I thought of off the top of my head, businesses we need to contact for supporting. And then marketing, which would be getting the word out about it, like to get the volunteers. So it would be that same list, plus churches, the schools, the city Facebook page, the health department, the library, Sherry Square shops, the banks, the post office, food trucks, Norwood Nutrition, things like that. So if you have other ideas for like where we should market, that would also be helpful.
Okay. I'm going to think about it.
Okay, that was that look? It's like,
Yeah, I was just like-
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I gotta process it. a little bit.
Yes, sir.
What you just read, are you able to send that to us? With like,
She
Yeah.
can send
That type of-
information, absolutely, yes. Here's some information, I'm going to send it to everybody, that's fine.
Can we
Just
do
don't reply
that?
and say, yeah, but I wouldn't include them, that kind of thing, right? Or, oh, you want to add, don't, no conversations.
Okay. So don't be offended if we don't respond.
I won't be offended. I'll just make my heart
Yeah,
hurt.
that's a great suggestion, if you'll send out
Yes,
that.
I can send you guys so much stuff.
Okay, that's totally fine. So, yeah. Do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
So we're scheduling a meeting. to
So
talk
let's
about it?
schedule,
So, City Hall, we close the Friday the 23rd and Monday the 26th. Just to let you know.
okay. And are we having council on the Tuesday, the 27th?
It's up to you guys. Sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. Usually it's just to pass a final appropriation. Sometimes it's been on Christmas and they just cancel it, sometimes they move it.
Okay.
Ken will let you know.
Are people around on the 27th? That Tuesday?
Am.
Yes, yes. That was not an
No, I
example.
will be. Not the 26th, I won't be the 27th, I could be.
Okay.
That's important.
What's the earliest time people could get here?
I'm already here, so.
Keith will be here, yeah, so noon.
Oh, if the kids are off, afternoon would be best.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, at 6, 6 is like, I mean,
No, that's
5:30
fine.
probably be pushing it, but
But
6, yeah. We can move it up.
How about for you, sir?
That's good for you?
That's fine.
6?
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how about we say Tuesday, the 27th at 6, and then if we have a council meeting after that, that will be fine, DEI.
And then, do we, after the holidays, want to do like a recurring so that we can?
Yeah, we can talk about that and see if
Okay.
that's what works
Oh, could
best
we
for
put that on,
folks, or...
could we put that on the agenda? For next time?
Yes.
Next meeting? Yes.
Look at you go.
We're doing
Talk
it.
about MLK and scheduling. Is that the only two things we're going to talk about?
No, because we'll also, maybe we'll have some data collection tools by then. I might have gotten some by then. Yeah.
Do you have extra copies of what she gave you?
No, I'm going to see if I can find, this is the city of Edmonton.
No.
I'm going to see if I can find this online, and then I can share it with you digitally.
Is it just?
It's,
Oh,
it's,
wait.
it's
I could
back
scan
and
it in,
forth.
too.
Oh, or he can scan it in.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good stuff. It also, it's 40 pages.
I even have a color copier. I could do it in color.
Oh,
Fancy, right?
all right. So he's gonna do that. Oh, but then they won't get it until the next meeting.
Well, I can scan this in tomorrow and just send it out.
Oh, you can send it via scan.
Yeah, why don't I'll just scan it to my
Right.
folder and
I was
just email
thinking
it.
copy.
Yeah, I'll just do
Okay.
an additional copy.
Should we, or can we create like a Google Drive where we can save that stuff, or is that not a good idea?
So I talked to TA about security and trying to do folders on our personal drive or a Google Drive. He recommended not doing our own server, just because because those three would not have access to it.
Right.
So I guess legally, are we able to do Google?
You could set it up, and that's the record repository.
Okay.
So that would be.
So everything that goes in there would be
You could, it would all be a public record.
a
Yeah,
part
you're
of public record.
correct. Yeah, because all the city departments got, the council's got a folder, but you know what I mean, so a lot of departments got a whole bunch of folders.
Yeah, because what TA would say was like, technically we could set them, or we could talk to you guys, could set you guys up with the access, but you would only have access at the city of Norwood, because you would only be able to access it with our Wi-Fi or our internet. If you were at home, you would not be able to access our drive, so I didn't think that would be very useful for you guys.
Well, I'm
So-
thinking most of the stuff is not gonna be confidential. It's gonna be stuff like this, or the history march part.
Just to have a place where we can reference things quickly and easily.
But I would, the problem with that would be, quite honestly, is that I don't know how somebody could get in and destroy whatever we have, but if they had access to the Norwood servers at all, it's just a security
Yeah.
issue that's kind of, it's better not to.
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
We could
surprised they
use
would even
physical
consider
copies
it,
of
to be
everything
honest, yeah.
On site, and we could do
But,
Google.
so I could do a Google Drive, and we
Yeah.
can just dump everything in the Google Drive.
Yeah, whatever you guys have on the server,
Yeah.
whatever's able to move over to
Then
Google
we'll keep
Drive that
physical
we need to
copies here,
see.
Just in case if Google gets hacked or whatever,
Okay.
we'll have the physical copies just to be safe.
All right.
Okay,
That sounds
who
like,
wants to do it? I can set up a Google Drive.
oh, I can do it, because I already have all the marsh stuff already in. So
Right.
then I can just make that one folder,
Sure.
and then, yeah, I already shared it with,
So then I'll send this to you, and then if you want to upload it, and then we can all or everyone else can just download it.
Perfect.
This little
That-
packet.
That works.
okay.
Nope.
All right. The folks who came in this evening, would you like to ask any questions or share anything?
Well, absolutely. Let me first take a different spin from what most folks would probably think I would say. I want to commend, back in 2015 and 2016, I presented a plan for the city. And here we are several years later, beginning to at least implement the plan. I want to applaud those of you who, however it happened, agreed to step up and actually become a part. Everyone thinks that I make challenges, because I do. But one of the things that Mrs. Banks said is, we have to ask the questions of why. And so, I just want to challenge us, and I say us because I have to be a part of it. I don't have to sit on the committee, because we get done what we get done regardless.
That's community.
Because all we're trying to do is advance people. As you can see, I have gentlemen that do have disabilities in my family. I raised both black and white. Okay? So it's not just about blacks. At the same time, when you name a committee, diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, Mrs. Banks said she's had about 20 years of experience. Well, since I've been about 23 or 24, I've been doing this work. She talked about accessibility. There's no one in this room that has had more hands-on experience, all of your time combined. One thing I want to say to the gentleman there, you bless me. Because transparency is so important to people of color who really are out there fighting the fight. And when he said, hey, honestly, I don't have much experience. That's the best thing you can do. Especially when you're in a room of someone like me that I do this, I live this. So Mark can tell you, when there were gunfire on the street of Norwood, the police can tell you, there was one person on the block challenging those dope dealers and those thugs. You're looking at them. So ask yourself why. Why are people like me not at the table? Why are people like me weren't even invited, not even included? And then tonight, for a person of color that's out there on the forefront, to have a meeting about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other than Marsh Park, I don't think if we had 100 African Americans in here that would be like me excited to hear equity, diversity, and inclusion. And there's one topic really not discussed. How do we, as a board, make people feel a part? Our law director can tell you, if there's an individual who is not a part, you're looking at him. And not because he doesn't want to be a part, but our protocols are not set up so people like me and other African American business owners even could have a chance at something like this. But here's the deal. Let's celebrate the reality that God must have chosen, for whatever reason, each of you. And so I'm 58 years old. And I've been doing this work since I've been 23 or 24. Okay? To sit in a room, I applaud you for being transparent. But ask yourself why. Why are we not leaning on the experience, proven experience, of the people that serve this community? And so, let's make something new here. I applaud you. Am I frustrated? She can tell you. Absolutely.
Right back at you.
Am I not happy? She can tell you. Absolutely. When I come to a public meeting, if the law director now has to educate you all, and the gentleman tells me I can't come in. Guys, if we're talking about diversity, how do we tell the most diverse person who's ever stepped foot in Norwood he can't come in? Yet the protocols hadn't even been filed. I'm not here to challenge. I'm not going to be a thorn in your side. What I'm going to say to each of you is, if God placed you here, and we have to trust that He did, then let's rewrite the narrative. Let's work together. Let's make sure we say, well, who should be at the table? For MLK, I applaud the first year efforts of volunteerism. But people like me, we put our life on the line. It's not just about going to the already city established places. I mean, nothing against Baby Bear. But I think if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was sitting in this room, he would say, y'all focusing on serving diapers more than you focusing on the fight and the cost that people of color have had to overcome. So in closing, I just want to offer something to you, because I believe we can get there, and I believe we will. But it's going to take bears like me, and I am a bear. It's going to take bears like me being invited to the table and being a part. I sent this text out, and I just want you to know what people need Good evening. This is Bishop Sonny James. I'd like to meet with you to discuss our third annual Martin Luther King and Black History Month celebrations. You're an important part of this community. We'd love to have you have your ideas and input for the planning as well as the participation. For the advancement of our community. Your input is more than welcome and very much needed in the planning as well as the overall participation. And it'll definitely help make further advancements in our community. So please be a part. I'm just one person. You all have to know what moves people. And it's one thing to sit on a committee and say, I'm here to invoke change, but really all you are is a pawn for the administration to do it how they want it done. Let's come together. Let's work together.
Thank you, Bishop.
You had your hand raised?
No, thank you, because I talk to my Black friends about that all the time, because that's the only way I learn. Ask the uncomfortable questions, because no matter how much I read on racism, as a white woman, like that's something I will never understand. And that's what makes change, those hard questions and those areas of interest that make people uncomfortable out of their comfort zone to promote change.
And I'm here to work with you, not against you.
Just a couple things of clarity, though. One, I'd like to just remind everyone had an equal opportunity to apply for the board. So, well, it went out, it was discussed in council maybe 6 different times. So everyone was invited to apply. So I'm sorry that if you feel like that, I didn't invite anyone specifically because I'm looking for inclusion of all people. And I want to make that very clear. I did not invite anyone.
Yes. Point well taken.
Okay.
But I think
The other piece, sir, thank you. The other piece is, as we're sitting here talking, one of MLK's dreams was about community service.
Yes.
And so if you have another location that you think would be an appropriate fit, by all means, let me know, let someone on the board know, let them know. I have asked. So that is a way that we can continue that conversation.
Yeah, and
So,
that's good, and I want to, so for our march and parades.
which I've done the
which
last
you
2 years.
participated.
Absolutely.
So, like, I didn't hear any of that today, although it wasn't on the agenda. and I
It was not on the agenda.
I
That's,
just want you all to know, we are open to everyone participating together so that everyone feels included and that their voice matters. As you see, I don't just represent people of color because we are one family and one body, and I want to celebrate with each of you to really help make a difference. But on some of the things that aren't discussed, she did a wonderful presentation tonight. She really did. My question though is, you hear what she's saying. Ask why. Just ask the questions. That's all. That's my initial challenge to just say. And I'll close with this. There was another woman, and I don't have her permission to mention her name, and I didn't even get a chance to reach out to her, so I won't. There was another woman who was accepted into Norwood and to work with the administration. And I met with her and I said, hey, good job, keep doing the work up. I said, do you notice just one thing that's not included? And she said, what's that? People like me. And she said, why is that? And I said, now be bold enough to go and ask. And I'm speaking intentionally to you. I said, but here's the problem. She said, well, no, there's no problem. At our next meeting, I'm inviting you. And I said, well, keep in mind, when you go and let them think, you're even thinking about doing something different. Number one, that meeting will never happen. And number two, watch out. That individual isn't even here either. to this day, as much as almost a year later, that meeting never took place. So I'm all for the Norwood guys, and I want to celebrate each and every one of you. I just want us to recognize when we do something wrong, and we do something to hurt somebody, don't defend it, because that's so offensive. Jump in the boat, like you say when you talk to your friends, that's beautiful. Keep talking to them. Invite them here, and then have them come back, because they're not on the committee, and just say, what do you think of what we're doing? And hear their heart. And then when they tell you their heart, bring it to the administration and say, well, what I'm hearing is, why are we doing stuff like this? Grants are great. All of that's great. But you still have people not wanting to come to Norwood because of the old reputation that we have. And I'm thinking this board is going to be the board to say, hey, we're going to do more, we're going to get involved. So I personally want to invite you all to participate with our Martin Luther King Day March Parade, which is going to happen. Okay? And our celebration with Xavier University that we've been doing. And we've already started meeting, and we're going to continue to do it. I want to personally invite you to come and be a part so we can shut out the enemy and stamp out that old adage, it's us against them, that we can work together, guys. And my prayer is for each and every one of you, that God use you to really impact change in this community. And I'm willing to die.
All right, thank you, sir.
God bless you all.
Okay, so just confirm our next meeting, and it will be here, because that won't be done for,
Probably until March.
okay.
That's effective.
Okay, so we're still going to be in the more stuffy space, but we'll,
Okay, so it
We'll
will not be
manage.
here? Okay.
No, it'll be in this room.
Oh, it will be, okay.
Yeah.
and that will be on Tuesday, December 27th at 6 PM.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. In the meantime, so my homework is I'll be doing a Google Drive, which I'll be sending all the stuff for you guys to look at. So it'll be the Marsh Park, the Edmonton information, the initial questionnaires, and I think that's it.
The yep, the Hawksworth blood drive, I'm
Oh, yeah.
working that, and
Yeah.
I'm also looking into that document, I'm trying to find more records for the Marsh
Oh,
Park.
yeah, yeah. Trying to find documents from the 19,
You're gonna load the stuff from Marsh Park onto the Google Drive?
yep. I already have it on a Google Drive, so I'll just move it into a second Google Drive and have that be a folder in the big Google Drive with all the other stuff. So I'll have lots of folders. I'm going to be very impressed if I get this. It's going to be so pretty.
I'm happy to
yeah.
help if you want any assistance with that. My homework is to look into cities who've pursued the historical marker and see if there's anything we can
Oh,
learn.
not the historical marker, I'm sorry. The work in the park, like reclamation in the park.
Gotcha.
Like,
The artwork, the play, the musical play things.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
absolutely. Sound good?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you,
much. I
everybody.
really
Appreciate
appreciate
it.
it.
Oh my God, my
Even